Captain Elaine Rivers stood at the helm of the Excalibur, staring out into the void of space. The stars stretched infinitely ahead, cold and distant, much like humanity's position in the galaxy. The Zarlok Dominion, a ruthless empire that controlled much of the galaxy, had wiped out most of Earth's colonies. Now, Earth itself was on the verge of collapse. The remnants of humanity had only one chance to survive, a chance Captain Rivers didn't intend to squander. The mission was simple: find anything that could give humanity an edge. Intelligence suggested that an alien ship, long believed to be derelict, was drifting in the dark reaches of the Sagittarius system. It was an ancient vessel, something no one had dared explore. But if there was a chance it held technology that could tip the scales, Rivers and her crew were going to take it. "Captain," Lieutenant Martinez's voice broke her concentration. "We're approaching the derelict. No signs of life. It's completely silent." "Understood," Rivers replied, her tone steady. She'd been through too many near-death situations to let fear take hold now. "Prepare the boarding team. I want a full sweep of the vessel. We're not here to pick through scraps. We're here to find a weapon." The Excalibur glided into the shadow of the derelict ship. It looked ancient, its surface marred by eons of space debris. Pockmarked and worn, the hull emitted a faint hum, almost as if the ship itself were alive. Rivers felt a shiver down her spine as they docked. The airlock hissed open, and she led the team into the belly of the ship. The interior was dimly lit by flickering blue lights embedded in the walls. The metal corridors were eerily quiet, and the faint smell of decayed wiring and stale air hung in the oppressive silence. The team moved cautiously, rifles raised, every creak of the ship echoing in the emptiness. Rivers' heart raced as they moved deeper into the vessel. There were no signs of alien life, nothing to indicate what had caused the ship to be abandoned. It was, for all intents and purposes, a ghost ship. Yet there was something about it, something that felt wrong. The ship wasn't just old. It felt familiar, as though it had once been built for a purpose far greater than anyone could imagine. Finally, they'd reached the heart of the ship. Inside a massive chamber, bathed in soft, eerie light, stood a battleship unlike anything Rivers had ever seen. Its hull was sleek, its design impossibly advanced. It was human-made, but its lines and curves were more refined than anything Earth's engineers had ever constructed. In the center of the room was a massive control panel, glowing with data, inviting them to explore further. "This is impossible," Martins muttered, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. "This can't be human." But it was. The ship's insignia, faint, almost obscured, was unmistakable. It was the symbol of humanity's ancient history, a civilization that had once ventured into the stars before disappearing without a trace. Rivers stepped forward, her hand hovering over the controls. A soft hum filled the air, and the ship seemed to awaken, as if it had been waiting for them. Lights blinked to life, systems activated, and a voice, calm, yet commanding, echoed through the chamber. "Humanity, welcome home." Rivers froze, her breath catching in her throat. Home. She glanced at her crew, but no one moved. She wasn't sure if they were ready to believe what they had just heard. But there was no denying it. This ship, this Titanus, was a legacy from a time before humanity had even known how far they could go. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "This is what we've been looking for." The battle for humanity's survival had just begun, and they might have just found the weapon to turn the tide. The next few days aboard Titanus were a blur of discovery and confusion. Captain Elaine Rivers had never seen anything like it. The ship wasn't just advanced, it was alien in the truest sense of the word. Every corner of the ship seemed to defy human understanding. The crew moved through the corridors with caution, still trying to get a sense of the vessel, its systems, and its capabilities. "Captain, you need to see this," Lieutenant Martinez called from the central command room. Rivers made her way quickly to the heart of the ship, where the crew was gathered around a massive holographic display. The projection showed intricate blueprints of the ship, glowing lines that mapped out systems Rivers couldn't even begin to comprehend. The hologram flickered as the ship's artificial intelligence, which had identified itself as Astra, spoke once more. "I am here to assist. I will integrate with your systems as needed. My primary function is to guide you to victory." Rivers stood in awe. Astra's voice was calm, almost soothing, yet the technology was far beyond what humanity had ever created. It had a sentience that no ship in Earth's fleet could match, and yet it felt human, or at least it understood humans better than she'd expected. The AI was able to anticipate their needs and adjust its systems on the fly, almost as if it was reading the crew's intentions before they spoke. "It's like it knows us," Martin said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Every time we think of something to do, it's already one step ahead." As the crew delved deeper into Titanus systems, the true scale of the ship began to unfold. The AI revealed hidden databases containing blueprints for weapons, defenses, and technology that had been long lost to history. There were no records of where it came from or who had built it, but one thing was clear. Titanus was not just any ship. It was a weapon capable of eradicating entire fleets with a single strike. "Look at this," Surgeon Thompson said, pointing to a screen filled with advanced energy weapon systems. "These weapons, they don't even work on traditional physics. They manipulate energy fields at a level we can't even begin to explain. It's like the ship is pulling from a completely different source of power." Rivers took in the information. The weapon systems were designed to unleash devastating pulses of energy, capable of disintegrating enemy ships in an instant. But the ship's true power wasn't just in its armament, it was in its design. The internal architecture seemed alive, constantly shifting, self-repairing, and adapting in ways no human-engineered system could. The AI, Astra, was deeply integrated into the ship's core, guiding its systems and keeping it in optimal condition. "The ship's design is symbiotic," Rivers said, more to herself than to anyone else. "It doesn't just work, it evolves with its environment. We could never build something like this." But what disturbed Rivers most was the ship's history. As they dug deeper into the ship's databases, they uncovered fragments of a forgotten past, a time when humanity had once explored the stars on a scale far beyond what the current era of humans had ever achieved. The records were fragmented, encrypted, and scattered, but the evidence was clear. This was a remnant of an ancient human civilization, one that had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only their most advanced creation, Titanus. "How is this possible?" Martins muttered as he sifted through more data. "This ship, it's human, but it's not from our time. It's too advanced." Rivers felt a cold shiver crawl down her spine. If this ship was truly from a forgotten age of human expansion, then what happened to the civilization that built it? Why had they disappeared, leaving behind this relic? "Whatever happened," Rivers said quietly, "this ship could be the key to our survival. But we need to understand it fully before we take it into battle." As the crew continued to learn from the ship, they encountered something even more startling. The ship's self-repair systems were tied to its core, a massive reactor deep within its center. This reactor, they learned, wasn't just a power source. It was a conduit, capable of drawing energy from the very fabric of space itself. And there was more. The ship's weapon systems were designed not just for destruction, but for domination. The more they uncovered, the more they realized that Titanus wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon of war designed to wipe out entire civilizations, to reshape the galaxy itself. The Zarlok Dominion would never expect humanity to have something like this. They thought humanity was weak, on the brink of extinction. But if Titanus could be harnessed, if they could learn to control its power, humanity would have the upper hand. But as Rivers looked out across the control room, she felt a sense of unease. The more they learned, the more she realized they were waking a sleeping giant, one that might be more dangerous than anything humanity had ever faced. The days following their discovery were filled with relentless testing. Captain Rivers had no illusions about what Titanus was capable of, but she understood the gravity of the situation. Every moment spent aboard the ship was a step into the unknown, and the crew had to learn how to use this technology quickly. They couldn't afford to wait. "We need to push it to its limits," Rivers said, her voice firm. "Every single system must be tested. The Zarlok are not going to wait for us to get comfortable." The crew worked tirelessly, trying to understand the ship's complex systems. Every attempt to interface with Titanus felt like a delicate dance. Too much pressure, and they risked triggering something catastrophic. Too little, and they wouldn't be able to harness the power they so desperately needed. In the command center, Lieutenant Martinez and Engineer Grant worked together to calibrate the ship's weapon systems. The screen flickered to life as Grant entered a series of commands, and the ship's energy core hummed to life. "Testing energy output," Martinez said, his fingers flying over the console. "We need to know how much power we can push through its weapons without overloading the system." Rivers stood by, watching as a series of power levels flashed across the screen. The ship's core, which had previously seemed dormant, now pulsed with incredible intensity, sending waves of energy surging through the hull. The entire room shook with the vibration of the power coursing through the ship. "Weapon systems online," Grant reported. "Energy levels stable. We're ready to test the main cannon." "Good," Rivers said, turning to the crew. "Let's see if it lives up to its reputation." They headed to the external observation deck, and Rivers gazed out into the deep blackness of space. A nearby asteroid field loomed in the distance, an ideal target for their first test. It wasn't a real battle, but it would provide valuable data on how Titanus weaponry would perform. Rivers gave the order, and a tense silence fell over the crew as the main cannon powered up. The ship's weapons systems thrummed with energy, and the once calm space outside the observation deck turned into a light show. In an instant, the main cannon fired. A massive burst of energy shot from Titanus, tearing through the asteroid field with the force of a supernova. The rocks were obliterated, disintegrating into nothingness in the blink of an eye. The shockwave sent a ripple through the ship's hull, and the crew braced themselves against the sudden force. "Impressive," Martinez whispered, awe in his voice. "I've never seen anything like it." But Rivers remained focused, her expression unreadable. She had expected nothing less. The real test would be how the weapon performed in battle, how it could be used in a coordinated strike against the Zarlok. "Let's check the damage output," she ordered. "We need to know how much energy was expended and how much more we can do." Grant worked quickly, analyzing the ship's energy readings. "The cannon's output is beyond anything we've ever encountered. It barely drained the energy core. At this rate, we can keep firing for hours." Rivers frowned. "That's too much power for a single weapon. We need to be careful. This ship wasn't built just for fighting. It was built for conquest." The realization hit her again. Titanus wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon of unimaginable destruction, designed to annihilate anything in its path. The very thought of using it against the Zarlok felt like tempting fate, but Rivers couldn't ignore the reality. If humanity had any hope of survival, they needed to master this power and use it to protect what little was left. "We'll need to train the crew," Rivers said, finally breaking the silence. "Titanus is more than just a ship. It's alive, and it thinks. We need to learn how to sync with it, how to become one with it, or we'll lose control." The crew nodded in agreement, though the weight of their task hung heavily in the air. It was clear. Titanus wasn't just a weapon. It was humanity's last hope. But with this kind of power came a cost, one they might not fully understand yet. As Rivers stood at the observation deck, gazing into the vast unknown, she knew one thing for certain. The Zarlok wouldn't know what hit them. But what would humanity become once they unleashed Titanus on the galaxy? Would they be saviors, or would they become the very thing they had once feared? The answers lay ahead. But for now, There was only one thing left to do: prepare for the coming storm. The news of Titanus' existence spread faster than Rivers could have anticipated. Within days, the Zarlok Dominion had become aware of the human vessel, and they were not pleased. The Zarlok were a brutal, war-hungry species, their empire built on the conquest and subjugation of others. For centuries, they had seen humanity as little more than an insignificant annoyance, something to be eradicated with minimal effort. But Titanus changed that calculation. The Zarlok were not known for their patience, and when word reached their high command that humanity had discovered an advanced weapon capable of annihilating entire fleets, their response was swift and unforgiving. The transmission came in the dead of night, the words crackling through the communication line like a thunderstorm. General Varak, the ruthless Zarlok warlord, appeared on the screen, his reptilian eyes cold and predatory. "Humanity," he began, his voice a low growl, "you have found something that was never meant for your kind. Titanus is an abomination, a weapon forged by powers far beyond your understanding. You will surrender it, or face the wrath of the Zarlok Dominion." Captain Rivers stared at the screen, her jaw set in determination. She knew what was coming. The Zarlok would never allow Titanus to exist, not when it posed such a threat to their dominance. They had to fight back, but not with just any strategy. This was a war unlike anything humanity had fought before. "General Varak," she responded, her voice calm but unyielding, "humanity does not kneel to anyone. We will not surrender Titanus. If you wish to destroy us, then come and try." Varak's eyes narrowed, a slow, menacing smile spreading across his face. "So be it, Captain Rivers. You will learn the price of defying the Dominion." The transmission ended, and Rivers felt a cold chill creep down her spine. The Zarlok weren't just sending a few ships. They were sending their entire fleet, a massive armada capable of wiping out entire civilizations. The Zarlok had never taken humanity seriously, but they would now. "Set a course for Earth's defenses," Rivers ordered, her voice filled with resolve. "Get us back to Earth. We have no time to waste." Within hours, the Excalibur and its crew were on their way home. As they approached Earth's defenses, Rivers could see the dim glow of the planet's few remaining strongholds, a symbol of humanity's last stand. The human colonies had scattered across the stars, leaving Earth vulnerable, and now the Zarlok were preparing to wipe it out. Rivers gathered her senior officers in the briefing room. The stakes had never been higher. She could see the tension in their faces, but also something else, something that hadn't been there when they first boarded Titanus: hope. "We have one chance at this," Rivers began, her eyes sweeping across the room. "The Zarlok will arrive within days. We don't have the luxury of time. We've tested the ship's weapons, and we know what it's capable of. But this isn't just about firepower. It's about using Titanus strategically. We need to outthink them, outmaneuver them." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We fight with everything we have, not just as soldiers, but as the last hope for our species." Lieutenant Martinez spoke up, his voice steady but filled with determination. "We'll need to work with Earth's remaining defenses. If we combine our firepower, we might stand a chance." Rivers nodded. "Agreed. I'll be in contact with Earth Command. Get ready for battle, everyone. The Zarlok think we're weak. Let's show them just how wrong they are." As the crew dispersed to prepare for the coming assault, Rivers stood alone for a moment, staring at the stars outside the viewport. The Zarlok were coming, but they had underestimated humanity's resolve. The crew of Titanus had something the Zarlok would never understand: the will to survive. The final confrontation was drawing near. And for the first time in what felt like centuries, humanity had a fighting chance. The countdown had begun. As Titanus sailed back toward Earth, Captain Rivers' thoughts weighed heavily on the future of humanity. In a matter of hours, the Zarlok fleet would arrive, and with it, a confrontation that could decide the fate of every living soul on the planet. The stakes were unimaginable, and there was no going back. In the war room, the final preparations were underway. Earth's remaining military forces were on high alert, positioned around the planet's last few strongholds. However, despite their best efforts, Earth's defenses were still severely outmatched by the Zarlok's massive fleet. The balance of power had always tilted in the Zarlok's favor, until now. The Zarlok are estimated to arrive within 72 hours, Lieutenant Martinez said, his eyes glued to the tactical displays. Our forces are spread thin, but we're coordinating a joint defense with Titanus. If we can integrate our technologies, we might be able to make a stand. Rivers nodded, her mind calculating the risks and rewards. They couldn't afford a direct confrontation. They needed to outsmart the Zarlok, draw them into a trap they wouldn't see coming. Titanus was humanity's most advanced weapon, but it wasn't just firepower that would win this fight. It was strategy. We'll use the Zarlok's arrogance against them, Rivers said, her voice cool and precise. They think they can crush us in one move, but they've underestimated what humanity is capable of. We'll divide their forces, strike where they least expect it. We'll use our knowledge of the terrain to our advantage. Divide their forces, Engineer Grant asked, eyebrows raised, with Titanus. Rivers smiled, a rare glint of confidence shining in her eyes. Exactly. We'll hit them where they're weakest, forcing them to spread their fleet thin. Titanus has enough firepower to cripple entire battalions, but we need to be precise. We'll have to stay one step ahead of them. Lieutenant Martinez tapped away at his console, updating their tactical simulations. If we launch a feint on their lead vessels, we can lure them into the asteroid field near Earth's outer rim. The Zarlok's sensors won't be able to track us through the debris, and we'll have the upper hand. Rivers nodded. It was a risky plan, but their odds were slim anyway. In war, sometimes the best strategy was to embrace the chaos and use the enemy's overconfidence against them. All right, everyone, she said, her voice cutting through the room. Prepare for battle. Earth's defenses will hold their ground, but it's up to us to deliver the killing blow. We have one shot. Make it count. As the crew moved to their stations, preparing Titanus for battle, Rivers took a moment to reflect. She had never imagined she'd be in a situation like this, fighting for the survival of her species with nothing but a relic from humanity's forgotten past. But that was the reality now. The weight of Earth's survival rested on her shoulders, and she couldn't afford to fail. Hours later, Titanus emerged from the edge of the asteroid field, cloaked in the shadows of debris. Earth's forces were in position, ready to launch the first phase of the operation. It was a delicate balance. Earth's forces would draw the Zarlok's attention, allowing Titanus to slip past unnoticed. Once they were in position, the crew would strike. The first Zarlok ships appeared on the horizon, their dark forms cutting through the void like predators stalking their prey. Rivers' pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was it, the moment they'd been preparing for. Fire the first salvo, Rivers commanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. With a hum, the ship's weapons systems powered up, and in the blink of an eye, a burst of energy lashed out from Titanus. The Zarlok ships, confident in their superiority, barely had time to react. One of their lead vessels was disintegrated in an instant, obliterated by the blast. The rest of the fleet lurched, disoriented, as their sensors scrambled to recalibrate. Rivers watched the results unfold on the display, a surge of satisfaction mingling with the tension that never seemed to fade. This was the beginning, but they had to keep pushing. Keep them off balance. No hesitation, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. We need to make them think we're everywhere. The Zarlok scrambled to regroup, but they had already fallen into the trap. The fleet was fractured, their once unified fronts splintering as they tried to regain control. Meanwhile, Titanus danced through the battlefield, striking from the shadows, taking out key Zarlok ships with each precision strike. But Rivers knew the Zarlok would retaliate soon enough. They wouldn't go down without a fight, and their response would come with overwhelming force. But for now, humanity had seized the initiative. As the battle raged on, Rivers felt a surge of hope. For the first time in centuries, humanity was fighting back, fighting with everything they had. And with Titanus at their side, they might just stand a chance. The first waves of the battle were brutal, but humanity was holding its ground. Titanus's weapon systems, powered by its mysterious energy core, unleashed waves of destruction across the Zarlok fleet. For every Zarlok ship that fell, 2 more scrambled to take its place. The debris from shattered vessels filled the space around Earth like a deadly fog, but Titanus remained unscathed, its advanced cloaking technology keeping it one step ahead of the enemy sensors. Captain Rivers paced the command room, her eyes glued to the tactical displays. The Zarlok were formidable, but they had underestimated humanity's ability to fight with purpose, and with Titanus on their side, they were turning the tide. But it was far from over. "Captain," Lieutenant Martinez called out from his station, "the Zarlok are regrouping. They've sent in reinforcements. We can't keep up with this pace indefinitely. We need to act fast." Rivers clenched her jaw, a surge of urgency sweeping over her. They had drawn the Zarlok into their trap, but now the enemy's true strength was showing. The reinforcements were far larger than expected, hundreds of ships, each one brimming with firepower. They had come to wipe humanity out, and they wouldn't stop until the job was done. "We need to disrupt their command structure," Rivers said, her mind racing. "Take out their flagship. If we can cripple their leadership, we might break their coordination." Engineer Grant, who had been monitoring the ship's power levels, spoke up. "Titanus can make a direct assault, but the flagship is heavily guarded. We'll need to use its cloaking tech to get within range without being detected." "Do it," Rivers ordered. "This is our chance." The crew worked with precision as Titanus powered down its energy signatures, slipping quietly into the heart of the Zarlok fleet. The enemy ships continued to swarm around Earth's defensive positions, unaware that the true threat was lurking just beyond their reach. As Titanus moved through the battlefield like a shadow, Captain Rivers' thoughts flickered to the crew. They had all risked their lives for this moment, an opportunity to take control of their destiny, to turn the tide of an unwinnable war. But even with Titanus' power, she knew this was no guarantee. One mistake, one misstep, and they could lose everything. The Zarlok flagship loomed ahead, a massive vessel covered in heavy armor, bristling with weapons. It was the heart of their fleet, and taking it out would cripple the enemy's ability to coordinate. Rivers could see the flagship's position on the screen, surrounded by a ring of Zarlok warships. "We're in position," Martinez reported, his voice tight with tension. "Ready to fire on your command, Captain." Rivers' eyes flicked to the screen, studying the pattern of enemy ships around the flagship. She had one shot at this, one chance to break the Zarlok's resolve. There was no room for error. Fire. A flash of light erupted from Titanus's weapon systems, and the world outside seemed to slow. The energy pulse shot forward with blinding speed, striking the flagship directly in its weak spot, its main reactor. The explosion was immediate and catastrophic. The flagship tore apart in an instant, its protective shields no match for the raw power of Titanus's weapons. A shockwave rippled through the surrounding ships, throwing them into disarray. "Direct hit," Grant shouted, his voice filled with exhilaration. "We've destabilized their command center." The Zarlok fleet, now without its central command, fell into chaos. Without their flagship, the remaining ships couldn't coordinate their attacks effectively. The human forces, which had been holding their own with Titanus's help, seized the opportunity. Earth's defenses, though thin, struck back with renewed vigor, picking off Zarlok warships one by one. But as the flagship was destroyed, Captain Rivers felt a surge of mixed emotions. Their victory in this battle was undeniable, but there was something troubling about the Zarlok's response. She had expected them to retreat or regroup, but instead they fought harder. More ships began to arrive, and the air was thick with the presence of reinforcements. The Zarlok would not be so easily deterred. "They're not retreating," Martin said, his voice grim. "They've switched to a full-on offensive. They're throwing everything they have left at us." River's pulse quickened as she realized the gravity of the situation. The Zarlok were about to make one last push. Their pride had been wounded by the destruction of their flagship, but now they were determined to wipe humanity from the stars. The battle wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. "Prepare for another wave," Rivers ordered. "We've broken their leadership, but now we need to finish what we started." With Titanus at the forefront, humanity had gained a foothold. But in war, victory was never certain, and the Zarlok were a relentless foe. The crew of Titanus had taken down their flagship, but the real fight was only beginning. The destruction of the Zarlok flagship had sent shockwaves through their fleet, but the victory was short-lived. As the final remnants of their leadership structure collapsed, the Zarlok fleet adapted with chilling efficiency. Their rage was palpable. What they had lost in coordination, they made up for in desperation. Waves of enemy ships surged toward Earth like a tidal wave, their weapons blazing with unrelenting fury. Captain Rivers stood in the command center of Titanus, her mind whirling as the battle raged on. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the Zarlok were now fighting with everything they had. Humanity had bought itself a moment, but Rivers knew it was fleeting. They needed to end this war, once and for all. "Captain, the Zarlok are massing their forces near the outer rim," Lieutenant Martinez reported, his voice tight with urgency. "They're preparing for another coordinated strike. If they get through Earth's defenses, we're done for. Our remaining ships won't be enough." Rivers clenched her fists, staring at the tactical display. The Zarlok were no longer fighting as an organized fleet. They were hurling themselves at humanity's defenses like a pack of hungry beasts, determined to tear through anything in their path. But what they hadn't anticipated was the one thing Titanus could do better than anything else: adapt. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Rivers ordered. "We need to break their momentum before they overwhelm us." Her crew worked swiftly, navigating Titanus with deadly precision, weaving through the chaotic battlefield as the Zarlok closed in. Every inch of space around them was filled with explosions and debris, remnants of the ships that had already fallen. Humanity had lost more than a few vessels in the skirmishes, but they had gained something invaluable: experience. As Titanus evaded the incoming barrage, River's mind was racing. She knew the Zarlok weren't just throwing ships at Earth. They were trying to force a decisive battle, one that would end with their victory. If they could push the battle into Earth's atmosphere, their advantage would increase. The Zarlok had a powerful fleet, but they didn't have the resources to win a prolonged battle in Earth's skies. That was their play: draw them in. "Send the signal to Earth Command," Rivers instructed. "We need them to fall back to the last defense zone. We'll hold the line here and draw them in. Then we'll finish this." Martinez's eyes widened. "You want to bring them to Earth?" "We don't have a choice," Rivers replied grimly. "Titanus's firepower is our best shot, but we need the Zarlok to think they've won. They'll follow us in, and we'll trap them." It was a dangerous gamble, but it was the only card they had left to play. The crew scrambled to put their plan into motion. On Earth, the last remnants of humanity's defense network reluctantly pulled back, creating a path for the Zarlok to chase. The Zarlok, in their arrogance, followed the bait without hesitation, believing that humanity was cornered, preparing for a last stand. The battle escalated as the Zarlok fleet descended on Earth's atmosphere, their ships now within striking distance. Titanus led the charge, skimming just above the atmosphere, evading fire as it looped around the planet's edge. The Zarlok followed suit, their ships disorganized as they pushed toward the final target: Earth's surface. "We're nearly there," Lieutenant Grant said, his voice tinged with apprehension. "The Zarlok are just a few moments away from breaching the atmosphere." "Wait for my command," Rivers said, eyes narrowing as she focused on the swirling chaos ahead. Every ship in the Zarlok fleet was now in range, unaware that they were being funneled into a trap. We strike the moment they breach the atmosphere. We need to hit them all at once. No hesitation. The tension in the air was thick as Titanus sped toward the final phase of their plan. Earth's sky was now filled with a swarm of Zarlok ships descending toward the surface. The battle seemed like a hopeless last stand, but Rivers could feel the shift. The moment was arriving. Now, Rivers barked, her voice filled with authority. Titanus's weapon systems powered up once more, its enormous energy core pulsing with violent force. With a roar that seemed to shake the very atmosphere, the ship released a devastating barrage of energy blasts, each one targeting a different part of the Zarlok fleet. The first few shots hit the outermost ships, creating massive explosions that disintegrated them on contact. But the real carnage came as Titanus unleashed the full force of its weapons. The remaining Zarlok fleet, now trapped in Earth's atmosphere, was torn apart. As explosions rippled through the enemy ranks, Rivers watched with grim satisfaction. It wasn't over yet, but the Zarlok fleet was now crippled, their ships burning up in the atmosphere like meteors falling to Earth. But there was one last thing to be done. The Zarlok weren't just going to let Titanus destroy them without a final retaliation. "We've got incoming," Martinez shouted, pointing to the tactical screen. A fleet of Zarlok reinforcements, larger than anything we've seen before. Rivers took a deep breath. The battle wasn't over, but humanity had just taken a decisive step toward victory. They had brought the fight to the Zarlok's doorstep. And now it was time to finish what they had started. The Zarlok reinforcements were larger than anything Titanus had ever faced. A massive wave of ships, hundreds, maybe thousands, emerged from the depths of space, their dark forms casting shadows over Earth. Despite the crushing losses they had sustained, the Zarlok were not willing to back down. Their fury was unrelenting, and their determination to wipe out humanity was palpable. Captain Rivers knew that this was the final moment, the one last chance to end the war and ensure humanity's survival. "We can't take on this many ships head-on," Lieutenant Martinez said, his voice laced with urgency. "Even with Titanus, we'll be overwhelmed. We need to come up with something more than brute force." Rivers stood in front of the tactical displays, studying the incoming fleet. The Zarlok ships were enormous, some larger than anything Titanus had faced before, and their weapon systems were clearly designed for pure destruction. But even in the face of this overwhelming force, Rivers was resolute. She had no intention of surrendering, not after everything humanity had been through. "We won't fight them on their terms," Rivers said, her voice steady. "We need to use Titanus's abilities to disrupt their fleet. We've been working under the assumption that we need more firepower, but we have something even more powerful: Titanus's versatility." The crew exchanged glances, their attention sharpening. Rivers continued, her mind calculating their options. "We've been using Titanus as a weapon, but now we're going to use it as a tool to turn the tide. We'll focus on disabling their ships, not destroying them. If we can cripple enough of their fleet, they'll be forced to retreat." "But Captain," Grant interjected, "we don't have much time before they reach the atmosphere. If they get any closer, Earth's defenses will be overwhelmed." Rivers nodded. "I know. That's why we need to hit them where it hurts. I want the engines on their ships disabled. We'll target their propulsion systems, throw them off course. If we can scatter their fleet and create chaos, we can break their formation." The crew set to work, with precision born of months of practice. Titanus's cloaking systems powered up, and the ship began to weave through the incoming Zarlok army. Each strike was calculated, the energy pulses from the ship's weapons targeting the Zarlok's propulsion systems, sending shockwaves through their ranks. A series of Zarlok ships sputtered, their engines faltering, and the ships veered off course, colliding with others in a chaotic mess of sparks and debris. Rivers watched with grim satisfaction as the Zarlok's once perfect formation began to fracture. They had expected humanity to fight in the same predictable way they always had, head-on, with brute force. But Titanus was a weapon unlike anything they had ever encountered, and it was forcing the Zarlok to fight on humanity's terms. "We've done it," Martine said, relief in his voice. "Their fleet is in disarray, but they're still coming." Rivers didn't flinch. There was still work to be done. The Zarlok were disorganized, but they weren't retreating. They would try to regroup and come at Earth again. "We have one final move," Rivers said, her voice calm but filled with resolve. "We'll use Titanus's core to overload the system. We'll create a singularity, a temporary black hole, right in the middle of their fleet." A stunned silence filled the room as the crew processed the idea. "Captain, are you sure about this?" Grant asked. "Overloading the core could destabilize the entire ship. We might not survive it." Rivers met his gaze. "We don't have a choice. If we don't do this, Earth is finished. Humanity is finished. But if we succeed, we'll end this war, once and for all." She turned to the crew, her eyes filled with determination. "Prepare to initiate the core overload sequence. We have one shot at this." The crew worked quickly, calibrating the ship's systems to redirect all its power into the core. Titanus groaned under the strain as energy began to build, the ship's entire structure humming with the immense pressure. The Zarlok fleet, still struggling to regain some form of order, was getting closer. They had no idea what was about to hit them. "Core overload initiated," Grant said, his voice tense. "We're ready." Rivers gave a nod, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Zarlok ships were only moments away from Earth's atmosphere. They had to act now. "Release the energy," she commanded. A wave of pure energy erupted from Titanus's core, radiating outward in a massive shockwave. The explosion ripped through the Zarlok fleet like a cosmic sledgehammer, creating a temporary singularity at the heart of their forces. Ships were torn apart, sucked into the gravitational collapse, their mass collapsing inward as the black hole grew larger. The Zarlok fleet was shattered. The remaining ships, unable to escape the event horizon, were consumed in the explosion, their forces completely annihilated. The shockwave reverberated outward, and as quickly as it had started, the battle was over. Rivers stood frozen, watching the empty void where the Zarlok fleet had once been. They had done it. Humanity had won. But as the final remnants of the Zarlok forces disappeared into the singularity, Rivers couldn't shake the thought that the victory had come at a great cost. Titanus had saved humanity, but the crew had given everything to achieve it. The war was over, but at what price?